you being here. Such a sharp-dressed group. I expect nothing less. I'm dressed down today for preschool lunch duty, so I thought that was a good excuse. But welcome to Boys Town. I know that you've been here 3 other times, or I guess this is a new year, but you come here a lot. And Jeremy asked me to say a few words. I said, what should I talk about? He said, Boys Town. I said, okay. So I just wanted to share, a little over a year and a half ago, I had breakfast at the cafe with the person who held my position before me. And I was looking for my next step in my career, and we were just kind of talking, and he said, what do you know about Boys Town? And this wasn't an official interview, so I'm not too embarrassed to say this is how I answered. I said, well, I know that, kids with troubles, they come and live here, and also you have a hospital. I don't know how it works together. And that was my answer. And he said, yep, that's about on par with what most people know about Boys Town. So I had a huge learning curve coming in. I learned a lot in the about year and a half that I've been here. But one of the areas that I was really unfamiliar with on a deep level was the hospital. And I've learned a lot about the hospital over the last year and a half. And so I wanted to share a little bit. So my experience was that my kid's pediatrician was here, and that was just because we moved to the neighborhood, something close, had a good experience. At one point, my son was 3. I'm like, man, this kid has meltdowns, right? So the pediatrician, she said, why don't you go talk to the people at the Center for Behavioral Health? And that was the extent of my knowledge. But what I learned, and I guess just by show of hands, are there many people who are familiar with our hospital and our research? So some, again, you're probably more knowledgeable than the average person. But what I learned was that when Boys Town National Research Hospital was founded in 1977, from the very beginning, the clinical areas that we were specializing in had a research arm tied to it. And that exists to this day. And so we're a specialty hospital. We're not a full service hospital. We're not claiming to care for all ailments. So that's why we love partners like Children's Nebraska and all of our other medical partners. But we specialize in certain areas and we do them really well. And we're international leaders in these areas. And that flagship area was hearing. And so we have this robust hearing research that's paired with this awesome clinical care. And our researchers and physicians, they work hand in hand to improve outcomes for families and children as soon as possible. So they're not doing research to just write a paper and put up on a shelf, but they really want to impact lives in a positive manner. And what I've learned since starting here is the newborn hearing screening was pioneered here at Boys Town, and 97% of newborns now receive this. And I don't know if you all remember that, you with kids, that first day in the hospital, you have your newborn baby and they take them away from you to test their hearing. It's a very vivid memory for me, and then they come back, you're waiting on pins and needles to know what happens. That was pioneered here, and now it's a great early detection tool, because if they detect at that early age that there's hearing loss, they can get them on a path for cochlear implants, which that technology, you've probably seen those videos before where a baby hears its mom's voice for the first time, and it's like, you can't help but get choked up. That's the kind of work that's done here in that area. Also, language and learning, which you can imagine ties in really well. Behavioral health is our third pillar, and really that has been at the inception, from the inception of Boys Town, we've been doing research on behavioral health. Flanagan was really kind of the pioneer in that area. And then the fourth pillar that we've added within the last decade is neuroscience, neurology. So we have an Institute for Human Neuroscience here on campus. They are doing research for Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, how radon impacts the brain, how, substance abuse impacts the brain, how trauma impacts the brain. And again, it's integrated with clinical care. So our neurology department at the hospital has really grown in the last 5 years. So 5 years ago, if your child had a first-time seizure in Omaha, you had to wait 6 months to see someone. And now you can see someone next week because we've intentionally grown that so well. The other areas that I feel like really are a community service are our psychiatric care. So we have an inpatient psychiatric unit, which is a hospital unit for kids who are facing immediate harm to themselves, and also our residential treatment center. So that's the long-term care treatment center where kids stay for an average about 100 days. They live there, they go to school there. It's 80 beds, ages 5 to 17. It's the largest residential treatment center in the region. And our wait list is usually 70 to 80 people. So it's a big need in the community, and a great resource for those families that need it. Mike worked at the RTC, but Matt was a family home teacher. So if you guys want some good Boys Town stories, they have them all, but don't scare them too much. So, but yeah, that's all I have. I know I probably went over my 3 to 5 minutes, but thank you for giving me a little time to let you know what Boys Town.
So our next meeting, just to let you know, is in Lincoln. I don't have the date, the first Friday in April, at the Lincoln Community Foundation. We were going to find a new location because they were remodeling, but the remodeling has been postponed, so we're at the usual location.
There's a surprise.
April 4th. April 4th, thank you. And there's going to be an opportunity there for you to bring any of your situations, complex plan gifts, structuring an ask, whatever you want to bring to talk about. There's going to be a panel of people who have done gift planning for a long time, and it'll just be open to address any kind of issues you bring. You can send things in advance. And so a great opportunity in Lincoln next month. Today, we have despite the weather, a really great turnout, and I'm sure it's because Matt is presenting today, and I see a lot of people that don't normally show up coming here today, so it's great that he's able to pull people. Matt was a longtime colleague of mine at the University of Nebraska Foundation before he took his current job as Vice President of Philanthropic Services for Bridges Trust Company. And he has a great combination of development skills and thinking about funding, impact, strategy, and how you can use all the tools to it, campaigns, plan giving, all the private foundations, all those kind of things. Right now, he works with a lot of foundations and structuring their philanthropy, their governance, their impact, and other private clients. So today he's going to spend some time talking to us about plan gifts, how they can be transformative, and a lot about, I think the title is the importance and value of plan giving asks, and how plan giving can fit into the bigger picture of philanthropy, of strategy, of impact, and make a difference for clients. Matt is a charitable advisor in philanthropy from the American College. He has an undergraduate degree in journalism from UNL and an MBA from DePaul University. I see him there in the back, Matt.
All right, thank you for having me here today. Please keep your expectations very, very low. What you're going to see. I'm really pleased to be part of this group and have the opportunity to talk to all of you about something that you know way, way more about than I do. Feel free, if you're bored, to just get up and leave, or ask questions to try to make it somehow more entertaining for you. I don't mind. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about what we do at Bridges Trust, and give you a little bit of, I guess, an understanding of what we do, because I think it's a little bit different than what you might be used to unless you work with Northern Trust or Bessemer Trust. Bridges Trust is fairly unique. We've been around since 1945. We're the first registered RIA in the state of Nebraska. We've grown to just over $11 billion in assets. Almost $3 billion of that is connected to charitable impact. So a little bit more than half of that is in family foundations and donor advised funds that we manage. And then the other half are for nonprofits that we manage their assets. And so that's pretty unique here in the state. A lot of people manage money for nonprofits that are I think 5,000 registered alone in Omaha. So there's plenty of money to manage there, but we're a little bit unique in the relationship that we have with family foundations and then donor advised funds and helping people thinking about how their philanthropy can be more effective and efficient. And hopefully a little bit of fun. So we consider those the 3 F's of philanthropy: effective, efficient, and fun. So that was fun. We do 4 basic things at Bridges Trust. Investment management has been the core of what we have done for 80 years. And then the trust department's been around since the 80s. So we've been doing that for a very long time. When Mike McCarthy came to the Bridges family in 2017 and purchased controlling interest, his thought process was always that Omaha really needs a financial services company that can provide family office services and philanthropic services. He'd seen it be very successful, mostly with Northern Trust and Bessemer Trust, back in the day when my wife was at the Omaha Community Foundation and Mike was the chairperson of the Omaha Community Foundation. I overheard a conversation where he's saying this, and this would have been in the early 2000s. Omaha really needs its own Bessemer Trust. And then fast forward a little bit more than a decade, we made that investment to make that happen. Speaking of my wife, I already had a couple of questions. So everybody that does know my wife is confused at how we have a relationship because she's very attractive, very smart, very articulate, and they don't get it. But a lot of people have said, "Hey, how's Sarah?" And she's doing great. Thanks for asking. She's got a meeting right after this with someone in the room, so I promise to make sure that we're okay. So I told her to come crash and she could be with all the other people here that knew me that would heckle. I assume that's why you're here. But apparently she had something better to do. What my team does, and again, I think we're somewhat unique in the state to have a philanthropic team embedded inside a financial institution. We help families with their giving. So here's kind of a list of things that we do there. You don't need to read all of it. Actually, won't let you. I'm going to move too fast for it. And we try to help people structure what they're going to do, just to make philanthropy can actually be very difficult for people sometimes because they're being asked for money by everyone, including their friends. They get engaged with different types of activities that the Red Cross is having a fundraiser, and they have a friend that's involved with that organization and says, "We'll buy a table," and then 20 years later, they've been writing a check and they don't remember why, kind of thing. And so we actually see this a lot where we'll try to help people analyze their giving and talk to them about what they really care about, what the kind of impact they want to make, and then we try to help them do that with going through sometimes a very, very specific process, and sometimes it's more of a conversation to end up where they want to be with their giving. This is a little bit more about what we do. We have really 3 of us that are full-time philanthropy, and then my boss, Marietta, who's exceptional, runs trust and family office in addition to philanthropy. We have the second most caps in the community, only behind Lutz. And I would like to say that we even have more. We can divide them into their accountants and their finance people, but we've really invested in that program. So a little plug if you don't know a whole lot about. I can't remember if it's certified or chartered. Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy, great program. Lisa and I did it together just this past year, and it's really exceptional. I know Sue's in it this next year. So if you haven't done it, check it out. Mark Weber is exceptional. I asked him to speak once about a decade ago. He said, if you can get your audience to just take away one thing as a speaker, you're really successful. So hopefully you take away one thing today that's better than Matt's an idiot, and if that's it, then I failed. One big exciting initiative that I've been working on for the last year is our own donor advised fund. So that's going to be launching next month. We are excited to be able to serve the Omaha community in the region with a donor advised fund solution that is basically has the same rates as your Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, some of the really big ones, and also have some local knowledge attached to it. So we feel really great about that value proposition, and then the revenue gets to stay in the community. So tell your friends, we've got a donor advised fund, and we're going to be really great at it. So That's exciting. This one even says not for public use yet, so I can blow through it. Donor advice fund, so very excited. Okay, enough about bridges. Any questions about bridges before I go on? Probably not. 500,000. And thanks for asking that. We are trying very specifically with our donor advice fund to not kind of be in the Omaha Community Foundation's space to a degree. They do donor advice funds. We've got, our kids have charitable checkbooks, right? And that provides so much value to the community. We want to remain a really, really good community partner and not that the OCF would say no to $500,000 plus donor advice funds. But we don't want to be just attacking that because they do provide so much good value. So thanks for that question. Yeah.
How does Bridges Trust approach truly trying to marry their donors' interests, their investors' interests, with the needs in the community? Because how do you keep your finger on the pulse of the Omaha community?
Our team spends a lot of time in the community, so we'll do about 400 nonprofit site visits this year. We did 400 last year, but we'll spend the same amount of time next year. What we really try to do, which is a little different than what I would say the OCF and probably what we do, is we gather information. We try not to make judgments. I mean, I'm not going to say that we don't have opinions because we do, and we obviously have our own biases. But really, what we try to think about is arming our clients with the information that they need to make a decision and not influence that decision based on what we think the community needs are, which is also a big distinguishing thing between us and the community foundation, where I think they do a really good job of saying, these are the needs. The landscape project was exceptional, is exceptional information. But we'll stay out of that judgment space and just say, this is, and continue to find information, including connecting with community foundations, if those are the sources of information, say, this is what we see the community really needs, where the money needs to go. But what we found is our clients really want to make their own decisions. So they don't want my opinion, right? So my title is still.
A follow-up question.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I personally struggle with is that for the vast majority of our donor clientele, I would say, in Nebraska, are older white people, for the most part, making philanthropic decisions for our community. With that.
No, that's the good.
Wow. I think about is just how do we arm our donors with the information about what is going to make the biggest impact in our culture, whether that's local culture, national, whatever. It's, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying we should influence them, just saying we should give them the information where the impact is biggest.
I think that information is important, and then the decision is theirs. Yeah. Is how I think about it. Okay. But informing them what's going on and who's doing what to make that kind of impact is super important.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, now back to the presentation. And feel free to jump in any range of questions that you have. That wasn't so random. Maybe by the end of most random. All right, here's some just high level thoughts and some statistics on planned giving. So planned gifts, this is great for you to go back and talk to see Darren. That was a trip. Already, that's fine. 200 to 300 times the size of the donor's typical largest annual gift is what statistically comes out of a planned gift. So super valuable. Planned gifts make up about 9% of all giving, which when you look at those two things next to each other, what that really says is there probably aren't enough planned gifts being asked for. For every dollar spent, this is another really great statistic. The highest ROI of any giving, and it's not even close, is planned gifts. Major gifts, which is what I spent my career really doing with the University of Nebraska Foundation. Keith mentioned when we worked together. I was very focused on major gifts. Had no idea that I was missing the boat the whole time, but we'll talk later about blended asks and how important I think those are. But this shows kind of the hierarchy. Sorry about the ugliness of this graphic, but it's still one quite doesn't look bad. There's at least it's gray. But you can see the bequests are just dramatically higher in terms of ROI than anything else, and get down into events and direct mail. In some cases, you'll see those as actually being losers. They just bring people into the fold with the hope that then you can get them to grow their giving over time. So they're all very important. And bequests, this says specifically bequests, but planned gifts are typically the most important. Some people might say that, well, if I ask for a planned gift, then they're going to get less during their lifetime. That is factually false. In 75, or I'm sorry, in most cases, it increases a 75% increase in the giving. So here's another. This is just another really busy chart for you to try to digest. But on the right side, it just shows what happened after people have committed to a planned gift. They give more on an annual basis. They're more deeply committed. I don't know anything about this stuff. Everybody in this room knows more about this than I do. So we're going to blow through the tax benefits and some of the technical things around planned giving. And every situation is going to be totally unique when it comes down to it with planned gifts. It's going to depend on a whole set of variables with their income, with how they make those gifts. But yes, there are tax benefits. Lots of them. So I really think about, and I think all of you probably do too, with planned giving can break down into really two categories: and income generating and doing some life income kind of gifts, which are usually annuities and trusts, and they can get, again, super technical and super complicated, or bequests, which are usually very straightforward and where 90+% of planned giving happens. And you don't need a JD or a PhD to work on a bequest. The University of Nebraska Foundation, if you haven't seen their gift intention form, you should ask for it, because it's a really great way to document some of the gifts that are out there. At least get some basic information and make sure that intent is kept. Oh, great! Send me. Call it an ask. Yeah. So they average about $50,000. So most of the major gifts for smaller organizations are probably maybe averaging major gifts that are $10,000 for a lot of you. So this is really, really significant. And so the point of this, and the point of the talk that I gave that got me in trouble, that got me here today, is basically just ask for planned gifts. They're not, they might feel intimidating, but you really need to go ahead and do it. So breaking down those two categories here real quick: life income gifts. I just took the CAP class and almost failed because of this stuff. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in these areas. Ask an expert when it comes down to it. But they, for really ultra high net worth people, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, people that are smarter than me, but it's mostly a tax strategy for ultra high net worth people. And right now, a taxable estate is $27 million. And so you have to be there before you're even starting to think about a lot of these things, which some people, hopefully you all have some of those that are giving to you. But, it's different. It's not for everybody. Bequests are for everybody. Let's see. So yeah, ask an expert, not me. There are a lot of you in here, but one thing that I found when in my current role, we work with a lot of accountants, a lot of attorneys. Even the attorneys that we're working with haven't dealt with a lot of lead trusts or remainder trusts. When one of our CAP classmates asked around it, his large, very well-respected firm, and was asking the senior partners, how many of these have you worked on? The general answer was maybe one. And so when I hear somebody say maybe one, that means zero, right? Like, you know, you just don't want to admit the number of work on. That's what I'm a little bit of a skeptic. So, so typically you all know this, best prospects for planned gifts are usually a little bit older. And I say historically here because some of the trends that I've been researching more recently say that you don't have to focus on 55 plus with your planned giving conversations. They don't have to be, particularly with bequests, they don't have to be particularly wealthy. The best prospects have limited family obligations, maybe no kids, or a limited number that they're trying to take care of. And obviously have to have a strong emotional connection to the organization or to the impact of the organization. I think this was something that I stole offline, desire for legacy. That may or may not be true. And then values driven and having values alignment with the organization, I think is really important. Trust in the organization. You're going to see, I was thinking about some of the people that are here today that are working with organizations that haven't been around for very long. So a loyal donor might be with you from the beginning, and that's only a couple of years. A lot of people work for other institutions that have been around for decades, if not over a century. And so when you see, probably, I mean, maybe Donald Trump would say, well, we found records that said we had somebody giving for 300 years, but I wouldn't believe that personally. But you probably do have people that have been giving for a decade plus, 20 plus years. And no matter how small that gift is, fantastic prospect. And then people that have been involved as well. So, and then this appreciation for recognition kind of goes back to the other one. Some legacy societies work. So if you're, and they're not that hard really to put together from my perspective. But a lot of people don't, just because they get intimidated by the whole process. So fascinating that millennials and Gen Z are showing a lot more tendencies in conversation about planned gifts, which is completely, so the oldest millennials probably 40, right? So, or in their late 30s. 42, okay. I'm a Gen Z here, not 45. It's 80. We'll debate that one later, okay. So that's at least a decade younger than what the normal math is, right? So, and then Gen Z, that's really, first estate plan around 44. The other thing that we still think a lot about is first estate plan with a lot of times what happens with the first kid. So that could be, this is a national statistic. My guess is that skews younger in the state of Nebraska because we do life earlier than we do on the coast, right? Like get married earlier, have kids earlier. Most almost 92% are using an advisor. So have good connections with your advisor network, accountants and attorneys in particular, and financial advisors too, but they're not going to typically be working on the detail later. I think that might change some of the conversation of approach that you have. Some of the similar, like if you get people involved early, then there's no reason not to start that conversation early with potentially being involved in a planned gift and not wait till they're old. So a little bit more around why Gen Z and millennials are showing inclination. They like to be identified as givers, volunteers, advocates, change makers, and humanitarians. So some of it's just about identity, values, how they feel about themselves. And so that's the why that is a statistic that's starting to, or a trend that's starting to show up. So I think involvement, something that we looked at with major gift stuff was involvement is really, really important. As generations go on, the greatest generation just wrote a check and said, go do something with the boomers often said, I need accountability, right? So then reporting started to become a really big thing and is a really big and important thing. And Gen X and millennials now Z want to actually be involved, and the more that makes it harder. But with plan gifts, then they'll be dead. So do that. So anyway, I use these. Think about using those words when trying to appeal to that younger set when thinking about plan gift. I didn't write this word either. I just took that straight out of ChatGPT when I was like asking for some different things. Younger donors are keen on giving away. So just know that. But these are like I was fascinated that of respondents polled, 1 in 5 between 18 and 29 already had their estate plans done and had charities. That's I would have never guessed that. Slightly less for 30 to 44, but still, those are way larger numbers than other things. Which probably should make this like a game show. Yes, but I'm assuming that we would have all looked at. The other thing that's I think something to keep an eye on, something to be involved in is just all of the digital outreach that's going on. And leveraging AI, talk about experience already, but how can you use AI as more information is pumped in to try to help think about how you're going to market and approach some of these things, how you're going to analyze your data to be the most effective and efficient with who you're reaching out to, when, and how, and all those kinds of things. In theory, that could make you better at your jobs, right? And more effective at the outreach that you're doing, and more targeted with the outreach that you're doing for potential plan gift prospects. Donor advised funds, the other big trend that is coming out. So more and more money has flooded into donor advised funds over the last decade, and they're not as big as private family foundations yet, and they probably won't be just because of some of those behemoth private family foundations, but they're, as long as the rules stay as they are or close to, they're a fantastic giving tool. And people, as we're building out our own donor advice fund, have got a lot more experience in talking to folks about what are they going to do with this money within that donor advice fund. What's the plan at the end? And there usually isn't one. People use donor advice funds usually with the thought that this is going to be their lifetime giving, but they're building up millions and millions of dollars in these donor advice funds that need some sort of a succession plan. And so there are all kinds of ways that you can do that. You can give it to your kids. It can be split among a group of advisors or become a board. Potentially, if you wanted to, or you can really have it act like a private family foundation if you wanted to, in some circumstances. But for the most part, there's not a lot of like named succession behind it. And so there's a real opportunity then, almost in the same way that you could be named the beneficiary of an IRA or named the beneficiary of anything else, that upon death, money would be distributed to charities. I don't know that that's been a common thing that fundraisers are asking for right now. If you're using a DAP, what's the plan when you're gone? But it's something that I think is going to just grow in importance. Unlike a private family foundation, donor advised funds, I'm saying the private family foundations look very different. Usually they're designed to live on in perpetuity. Lots of sunsetting going on, and different kinds of techniques that are growing right now. I would say sunsetting is getting far more popular, but donor advised funds typically are not thought of as a perpetuity or a 10, 20 year kind of a plan. It's for today. So big opportunity there. All right. I promised I was going to talk about blended ask because I don't know as much about plan giving as you do, but I raised a lot of media gifts over the course of time, and thanks to people like Keith trying to drill some of this information into my head, like, hey, there's a lot of money out there that they're not going to give away today. really is, the main point is ask for it, right? So how do I ask for it? I've had a lot of conversations, mentioned before when, answering Sandy's random question, like we have 400 nonprofit visits a year. A lot of the smaller nonprofits that we visit with say we'd like to put together a planned giving program, but we don't know how. It's too complicated. It's something that we've been talking about for years, but we've never done it. And I think that there are some very simple ways. You don't have to have a planned giving program to start talking to donors about planned gifts. And so if you're asking them for money, we mentioned earlier, you're a brand new organization, you only existed for a period of years. So getting donors as loyal as you is a lot easier to say if you're Creighton or the University of Nebraska that have been giving for decades. If you've only been around for a few years, we'd say you've been with us from the beginning. Let's talk about sustainability. And then a lot of people that we work with that have giving like yours have left us in their state of will. Is that ever something that you've thought about? I think some of those are really soft and easy ways to get into a conversation about planned gifts, and sometimes that can roll back into major gifts. And so that's if there is one takeaway, invest more in your planned giving and try to make sure that everybody is asking for planned gifts in some way, shape, or form. And I think that there's just really easy language to get into it. And sometimes that helps your major gift people too, because going from developing a relationship to asking for money like that pivot can sometimes be challenging, but asking some of these conversations are easier than asking for a check out of a checkbook right away. So you'll read this and say these things out loud. I mentioned before the gift intention form. I think it's really, really great to have some sort of documentation. And when the University of Nebraska Foundation developed its gift intention form, I love being able to talk to donors about making sure that their intent was upheld. Because I saw several stories where, and it changed with leadership over time, but when I first started at the foundation, it was just all right, this is what their giving history was, so we're going to try to predict what they would have done based on what they did do. And then development people would more or less fight over, like, well, they were giving to engineering more, so I think that their trajectory was giving more to engineering than it was to business, or husband and wife, or these colleges, and so they would try to figure out how to divide it up. And that was if nothing was named, right, in the estate. It's just the University of Nebraska Foundation. Now it's like, well, if it's not named, then it goes to the general operating fund, which solves one problem and creates a new one in some ways, right? So what always made me feel good about asking people to document was we would have something on our file that clearly stated what their intent was with that planned gift. And then we would end up being able to get some other information through that conversation, but it really started with intent. What are you trying to accomplish with this money? And there would be some cases, there was one case was that that's way too much money to accomplish the goal that you're going after. And in other cases, it might be, well, that's not enough money to do what you're trying to do. And this always can then lead to the conversation about, well, would you like to see that impact in your lifetime? If you want to do this long term, and you know they have and in some cases they might not have the money to do it, but being able to blend those asks are really, really valuable tool. We were talking earlier just before this started. Keith said he had 3 planned gifts coming in, 2 that were going to be higher, 1 was going to be lower. I think you're always going to see it's almost always going to be wrong, right? Not going to be a specific number, but over the law of averages, it's really helpful for forecasting. We don't know when our donors are going to pass away. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it gives you some idea of what kind of money could be coming in over the course of time. And then the other thing that's really important, I think, in all of your developmental roles is making sure that you're able to count these things appropriately so they're properly incented to have the conversation around a planned gift. So the emphasis isn't always on just cash in the door. And going back to the very beginning, planned gifts can be 200 to 300 times the size of an annual gift. Much larger ROI, but they're not gifts that you're getting in cash today to solve any problems. So it's pretty easy to put more emphasis and more value on what is going to come in today. But that goes back to the old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the next best time is today. So if you're planting those seeds today, you're not necessarily going to see that tree for decades, but in that time, the planned gifts are really going to be what are holding up, then being a really big gifts that move your organization forward. So you just got to start. Kind of last thoughts here on why to do it. Yes, Cal, question.
Thank you. You have that this documentation of what's best managed internally. How you design something or how you memorialize it, give a sense of what has worked well.
My experience is limited to one organization.
Okay.
Emily, did you want to answer that question for me?
But you're really not in the state, you are. It depends on the donor, who would love. I like to fill out demographics sometimes at any time of the plan, so you don't spend time on any address. But so we have that kind of stuff documented, or it's just, in the conversation. And then. But have the form between us together, and always in the form between us.
So that's basically it. I think the last line is super important. Keith and I were also talking about other stuff. I had a donor tell me once, like, we're not making planned gift because I do not want you to think of me as more valuable to you, Dad. And that was a direct quote. And I thought that was helpful. He said it out loud. I think other people probably are thinking it. So keep that in mind as you're stewarding your planned gifts, to not lead with, so how are you feeling? What's going on? Let's go to the amusement park and lick some rides. That's it. So any other questions? Thanks for not leaving. Please, when you see him, so give him a hard time for leaving his own office.
So we kind of laughed at that last line, but I had that happen too, and they said it out loud to me. And I actually had, the husband always talked to me about the planned gift, the wife did not, but it's always verbal, and like, wants to be able to document this in some way, shape or form, but then, my many attempts over the years, I later found out from him that she felt that we were valuing her dead than alive. Still working through this one and trying to figure out how I could potentially get it documented. But how, now knowing that what are some ways that like you can sort of combat that to have them feel that way?
I always live with intent, right? Like, this is, I hope that you're around forever, but when you're gone, we want to make sure we get it right. And so you don't have to fill out the rest of the form, but just at least let us know where you want this to go. Otherwise, it's hard to say. So, I mean, if you want to specifically support UNO, then write that down. Otherwise, in the general fund, it could be supporting athletics and Kearney, and you don't care about that, right? So that's just write that down. And then usually they start to, like, that was my experience. Then after they started, then they felt comfortable. And then some would lowball the number, right? Or they're like, I really don't feel like I want to give you this whole thing because we're trying to bounce our last check, right? That's always fun. People are like, I'm trying to, you're in our estate, but only if we are unsuccessful in spending it. but lead with intent. You promised me you weren't gonna ask a question.
I'll make a comment. No, I was just gonna say, kind of related to your last point about, one thing that, I think has been successful is when you're at a place like forever, you make, like, I've worked with donors who put gifts in place 10 years ago, when they weren't in a financial position to write a check for their deferred gift. 10 years later, their financial world has changed dramatically. And reopening that conversation by saying, hey, have you considered, I know you have this in your estate, but is this something you'd be interested in funding now? Can be a really interesting circle back on how, how people are sometimes feeling valued, that kind of thing. Just seeing that there's so many people have such a significant change in financial position over the years as an opportunity.
Well stated.
You're talking about the DAFs and beneficiaries, working with so many nonprofits and learning about their missions. Do you find a lot of people tracking DAF gifts and then having conversations specifically around those beneficiaries? A, and B, for the folks that you guys are working with, are those beneficiary lines for the most part left empty until you all help them address that?
Very first, no, I have not been tracking DAF. Which doesn't mean that they aren't or that you aren't, but I would recommend you should start. And then say the second half of that question.
With folks that either you're working with coming to you for, folks that already have DAF established elsewhere, or maybe your own folks that you're taking on. Are those beneficiary lines for the most part empty until y'all help them fill it?
Generally, that's not their primary focus. So again, comparing it to the private family foundation, they're thinking about succession usually from the beginning. And what sustainability looks like. With donor advised funds, it's more of an right now tool, and so it does use big prompting. Let's see, who do we want to take this over? Where do you want to distribute it out to? Those lines are blank until prompted the vast majority of the time.
Like with Fidelity, when you send it online, it gives you the option to add that. And then have the disclaimer, if you don't, it'll go to our fund or charitable arm, it'll go to Fidelity. And so like, that's probably the only time I ever think about it. When you don't have that answer, then you probably just check the box and people in the field.
And nobody wants that, right? With their charity, you just have a roll up into $1 billion advice fund, you just have no idea where it is. That's not usually what it's looking
That's why
for.
that the community foundation doesn't say that. It says our unrestricted and balanced funds. So again, it brings the community side back to default. But yeah, the conversations I have depends on how quickly we want to set them up. Yes. Fill it out, get it done, electronically sign it, we're good. And it's about this spot here. But there are some that we work through that, what their charitable legacy must be, and others are 5 years later, I'm still trying to find out exactly what they want. I mean, there's a fail safe there. But some people don't want to come to part of the conversations.
One thing that we have started doing just this year, we're starting to roll out these fund reviews. And so we're starting with all our donor advised funds to do a strategic review of their giving. Some of them have been open for 10 years, some of them a couple of years, whatever. But we look at their giving, kind of look at how their strategic giving, most of them are not very strategic. But it also allows us that opportunity to, because the default, if there's any remaining fund balance, it does come to us. It immediately opens up that conversation. How do you want that used? So we are seeing donor advised funds turned into then field of interest funds that are going on in perpetuity or endowed, or we have seen some term endowments where they set up a either field of interest gone for 10 years and expense gone over the next 10 years. So those, we have seen DAPs actually more and more turning into like a legacy gift. of some sort.
By the way, I think. Not in my number, that's fine, but, because we're in this small boutique kind of, just, we know all our clients, but Schwab Fidelity, they don't know their clients there, so. If you have that personalized connection, much higher likelihood. Well, thanks, everybody. I've got, I did promise, several people, one that's meeting with my wife, others that are meeting with my colleagues, that we'd be out of here early, so we can get those, meetings on time. But I appreciate nobody leaving and your time and attention today. Please do let me know if there's anything that I can do or Bridges can do for you. And thanks for being here.